Alrighty, good evening. It is Friday, March 19th, and it is just 9 p.m. Eastern. And you are
Yep, you're
just
on
in
there,
time.
DJ.
Excellent. You are just in time for that show about film and television trivia. So it looks like we have a few folks already in the chat room. Shall we begin this thing?
Well, I think we should.
Do you remember back when you had a nice little stroll through your hometown and thought about that special someone you carved your initials on the tree with, and well, maybe you lost track of each other, and you got you got important in your job. This show's a little bit like that, and there's some toys involved that just lit up people's childhood. So, well, hello there, and welcome to the Marionette Theater. And how are you this fine evening, Mr. Smellie?
Pretty good, very good, actually. Looking forward to tonight's topic. Favorite of mine, because I was just the right age for it when it was airing. So, and yay, spring coming soon.
Yes, I hear that tomorrow is allegedly the first day of spring, and just this last week we changed our clocks, spring forward, as they say. You know, I remember I'm just old enough to remember the days when the local cable company out in the haystack, they used to have a message board on one of their channels. It was like a community bulletin board, and whenever
Really?
yes, and whenever one of those occasions passed where it was either New Year's or a time change, you had to wait until Monday morning when the cable company came into the office for them to change the date and time.
Uh-huh.
But
Huh, that's funny. Yeah.
we are not alone in the balcony though tonight. Do you notice the
Mhm.
presence of a special someone?
I do. Our fembot pal, it happens to be your hubby, Billy Starsage.
Why, hello there, mister. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we are here to put you on the spot with your expertise in this subject.
Well, hopefully I'm ready for it.
All right.
Yes, grab your snacks, and we'll get this show on the road there. And is Madame Gertie in the house?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I wouldn't miss anything with Lee Majors. Hubba hubba. Yeah, baby. Ooh, baby. Oh, I'm sorry.
Gertie!
Well,
We try to be a family show. Maybe not always, but ma'am, if you could be so kind as to get down to the stage for us, we're going to let the folks know what we're discussing tonight.
all righty dighty. I'll be right down here. There she goes.
Hometown hero Steve has been everything from a test pilot to an astronaut and has even been to the moon. He's worn many hats, but he ends up in new shoes when a crash landing leaves him indebted to a secret government agency. Steve's life has been saved, but at what cost? Well, let's just say he ends up working it off. Now, slip into some bell bottoms or a comfortable tracksuit. We're going back to the 70s. It's time for the $6 million man with Lee Majors. Hit it, boys.
What do you get when you take a dash of the silver screen? a pinch of golden oldies, and a smidgen of screaming. It's time for Matinee Minutia with your hosts DJ and Toppie.
Alrighty, now some of you may have recognized the theme that was playing behind our senior showgirl there, but I'm here to give you a little bit of a different take on it. When the show started in 73, it was a series of TV movies, and well, there's a different approach to the opening theme in the very beginning.
Mission Control. Steve, what is it? What's wrong?
I was hoping you could tell me.
He's alive. He lost an arm, 2 legs, and 1 eye, but he's alive.
I'm not sure he'd want to live if he can't be the man he was.
What if he could be more than the man he was? We have the technology to rebuild him. I want it done no matter what the cost.
He's the man. He's the man. Catch him if you can, beat him if you can, love him if you can. Now he's the $6 billion man.
Okay, so hey, Madame Gertie there, is it true that you used to have a thing for Lee Majors?
Just a little, maybe a lot, okay? Anyways, he was handsome. My God, I fell in love with him when he was in the Big Valley, for heaven's sakes. Woof, woof. Oh, anyways, yes. Very fond of him.
Oh, well, I knew you had a poster of him, but didn't you have a girlfriend that might have a little bit of trouble, Mr. Majors?
Well, you think I was a girl in those days? Yeah. Well, my girlfriend had a poster, and she knew someone who had a restraining order. Well, we shouldn't talk about that. She just made bail after all.
Oh my.
Well, what do you want? Anyways,
So-
I'm going back down to eat candy. Bye.
We're out the wrappers this time.
Yeah. Holy cow. You know, if I'd heard this show with that Dusty Springfield opening, I'm not sure I would have tuned in. But anyway. Oh, Lord.
So, Toppie, there's a little something that we like to try to do here to put people's minds into play for the time it came out.
Yeah, we want you to think back. It's a little disheartening to think how long ago this was. But DJ, take us back and tell us what was going on in the year of our Lord, 1974, when the $6 Million Man was going on.
All righty. So, in honor of our guest of honor tonight, my hubby Billy, I'm going to have Billy read The World in 1974.
Ah, yes.
Well, let's see. U.S. history in the year 1974. Daylight savings time began 4 months early in response to energy crisis oil embargo.
Ooh.
The U.S. District Court Judge George Bolt rules that Native American tribes in Washington state are entitled to half of the legal salmon based on treaties signed by the tribes and the U.S. government.
Well, isn't that generous of them? Well, that's nice. Half of them. Ah.
And Stephen King's first novel, Carrie, is published.
Wow.
Yeah, that's old. The Universal Product Code is scanned for the first time to sell a package of Wrigley's chewing gum at the Marsh Supermarket in Troy, Ohio.
Okay, could someone tell me why it was rolled out in Ohio?
Not a clue. Richard Nixon
They always
becomes
test things out in the first.
Oh, okay.
Richard Nixon becomes the first president of the United States to resign from office.
Oh, and we got so close with
Too bad he
someone
wasn't.
else.
Yeah.
All right. Also 70.
Oh, well,
Yes, 1974. We're going to take a look at, let's take a look at who was born back then. You might be surprised. First of all, Seth Green. He's the, oh my God, he's famous now. The actor, voice actor for Family Guy. He plays the son, Chris Griffin. Jerry O'Connell, who plays Quinn on Fox Sliders and does the voice of Clark Kent. Superman on Justice League. Grace Park. She was Boomer when Sci-Fi remade their Battlestar Galactica. Allison Hannigan. She was in My Stepmother is an Alien and How I Met Your Mother. She liked movies about mothers, I guess. And then there was Leonardo DiCaprio. Of course, we know him from Titanic and so many more movies. And he was Oscar nominated for The Wolf of Wall Street in 2013. So all those folks were born way back then.
okay. Well, the $6 Million Man, the topic for our discussion tonight, it was a TV show back in the days when maybe you didn't have a remote. You certainly didn't have a way to record your shows. So you had to catch them when they are on, and you probably got a paper guide, a TV guide maybe. So other things on when the $6 Million Man aired, it premiered as a TV series after a few TV movies in the fall of 74. Now, in its time slot, which was Sundays at 7:30, its competition included an NBC, because it was part of the American broadcast company, NBC. On NBC was The Wonderful World of Disney, up for competing on Sunday nights, and in later seasons, in 75, $6 Million Man moved to 8 p.m., which ran opposite CBS's The Sonny and Cher show.
That's about right. So let me tell you guys, for years and years, I was a Disney boy. And certainly on Sundays at 7:30, it was a total tradition right after the Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom to watch The Wonderful World of Disney. Until that is, the $6 Million Man came along. And then I was old enough to say, bye-bye, Disney. I've watched this new thing. So, yeah, that's where it was for me. I was completely oblivious to the television movies because they would have been airing at a time I would have been in bed. But somehow I knew that some weird show was starting. I think my father had seen at least one of the TV movies, and he said, "You're going to like this, son." And then I started out watching what they call season 2. I'd call it season 1, but on NBC.com, they call it season 2. And that's where I started on the first episode of season 2. So that's my origin story for that show. DJ, where did you come in on this? I mean, I'm sorry,
goodness.
Billy.
Well,
let me ask Billy first.
When did I
Beauty
first
before
discover
age.
it?
Yeah.
Well, I have an older brother who I sometimes forget that I have, but that's a totally different story. every Christmas, my mom had to make sure that things were even. So she made sure that Santa Claus got us both the same sets of toys. And if you're watching on YouTube, they are proudly displayed behind DJs. Those are the very ones that I grew up with. And when I was young, I was probably 3 or 4 when I really started watching it, but I had the toys immediately when they came out in 75. So I was about 2 or 3 playing with them and just starting to get into the series. But my brother watched it first, and then I got into it, mostly with the last couple of series of the Bionic Man and the final episodes of Bionic Woman. And then I watched them in reruns.
Okay. How about you, DJ?
Well, it's quite an interesting question because I grew up out in the haystack, unlike hubby, who was in a semi-bigger setting there up in Oslo. I don't remember $6 Million Man airing. I was basically a little bit more than a twinkle in the eye. And actually, come to find out, until more recently, when these episodes were finally released on DVD, we can talk about that a little more later. Apparently, $6 Million Man did not air reruns that much in the earlier days to its original broadcast. So I kind of stumbled on it after discovering its little sister show, Bionic Woman. And that, of course, I discovered through the Sci-Fi Channel when they started airing it in their early days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I read was that the guy that wrote the novel Cyborg, which is what the whole thing started with, it was a novel in 73 that was very popular. The guy that wrote that, apparently Universal just could never come up with an agreement with him. And I understood that it really didn't go into syndication. Maybe the Bionic Woman did. But anyways, that's just what I understand about $6 Million Man when it wrapped up. Aside from those 3 movies they did a decade later, I mean, you just never saw it again. So they must have finally arranged something with this Cyborg novel guy to let them get it on Sci-Fi and release it on DVD.
Maybe his kids just weren't as greedy. Oh, did I say that out loud?
They played it on a station in New York on WPIX at about 3 o'clock every day in the early 80s for the Bionic Woman. They did have the crossover episodes, but I watched that religiously when I came home every day.
Gotcha. PX. Oh, that New York station. Oh, we got it here in Pickle Hollow too. And great station.
It was a great station until they traumatized me by taking it off the air. And one day I came home to watch it, and instead of the Bionic Woman, it was What's Happening.
That ain't right. Billy, that ain't right.
And they ended it on the crossover episodes with the Fembots. And it wasn't until about 9 years later that I got to see the second part when it aired on Sci-Fi.
Oh my God, that's super ain't right. Oh,
it traumatized me, Toppie. Traumatized.
I understand. Hey, before we get going, let me just say hi to the chat room. Because we do have a chat room. For those of you who are listening to this as a podcast, we actually do this live 2 Fridays out of the month, the 1st and 3rd. And you could be here too when we do it. And here in our Discord chat room, we've got Aunt Tudor, our good friend Aunt Tudor from Maryland. We've got Janet from another planet. We've got Crone Haven, the ever mysterious, and our good pal who comes by every single time, Tommy Hash Browns. Thank you all for joining us.
Okay, so continuing the discussion on the $6 Million Man, 70s action, adventure, those TV movies, they each had a different approach to the story. And, at times they made him sort of out to be a 007 of sorts, an American 007, because he went to the party with his tux, and little did you know, he was dressed for the action because the tux just came off with a flick of the wrist.
Yeah, can we talk about this just for a second? I this is a very unusual thing, in my opinion, that they had this property. They bought the license to this novel. They said, "Hell yeah, this will make some great TV." They tried it out in a TV movie, which is often how networks would try something out, and maybe thinking, if it gets some good ratings, we might just make this into a TV series. But for some reason, they didn't stop with one. It's almost like they thought, did we get that right? I don't know if we got that right, but we have such confidence in this as a TV series. We're going to try it again. So out comes another TV movie, really another pilot, and it's quite different. And then they do it all over again for a third time, and it's completely different. So speculation, Billy, I mean, that seems to me what they were doing. They had such confidence in this that they said, well, damn it, we got some angle on this and we want it to work, and we're going to spend the time and money to have 3 pilots. We don't care.
Well, it started off more like James Bond, and started getting not campy, but it started to go into the superhero genre a little bit more. They started moving away from James Bond. Every once in a while, you would get, more and more of the spy stuff. But the campy stuff is really what started to sell it, along with a lot of the innuendo that was in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hence the DJ played that Dusty Springfield intro, which they were so obviously going for a James Bond gestalt there, and boy, am I glad they dropped that like a bad habit. Yeah, they went more. They brought him back down to earth. And instead of being this super spy, he just became an ex-astronaut that was involved in secret missions. And I think for Lee Majors, a much better way to present him as kind of a down-to-earth guy.
Which is interesting because the last episode of The Bionic Man in 78 ripped off the current James Bond movie.
Oh, yeah, The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah, is that what it was?
Billy, yeah. And, if for no other reason, Toppie, people who may not have seen the original TV movies that were done, I would encourage you just simply for the fact that the guy who played the dad in the Christmas Story movies, the one about the leg lamp, well, he is basically Oscar Goldman in the original pilot.
Right. The wonderful, the great Darren McGavin. Yeah, he was in there, and then, he bowed out, or just maybe he was busy with other things and they couldn't get him back, so they replaced him.
And we sadly, have a request. He wasn't missed.
And we have a request in the chat room to hear some of the sound effects.
All right.
So, continuing discussion there. Now, Bubby, as you said, Billy, one of the ways you were introduced to the show was because your mom got the same toys for you and your brother. Now, how do you feel about the role of toys? Do you think merchandising plays a big role in a show's popularity, especially if you're trying to get kids to watch?
Oh God, yes. And this was the big time around Star Wars when it was coming out. So towards the end of the 70s, it really geared up. Bionic Man kind of came out in 75, but once Star Wars hit, there was no doubt that they had to pump out as much merchandise as possible.
Yeah, in fact, some speculate that that the $6 Million Man looked tame, and once people got a load of Star Wars, it was like, oh, that just took attention away, because $6 Million Man was about the only sci-fi kind of weirdo, superheroish, outlandish kind of TV show going at the time, and it sustained itself for 5 years or more. And but once Star Wars was there, that was it for the $6 Million Man.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that one $6 Million Man was no longer part of the ABC lineup. In its time slot on Sundays was Battlestar Galactica.
There you go. There, that says everything right there. That's right. It did get in there on the same time.
Hey,
So,
Toppie, I gotta
yeah.
ask you a question. Speaking of Star Wars and the $6 Million Man, do you think the Star Wars influence had a negative effect on the show? With episodes like The Lost Island where you have space aliens and so forth?
Well, maybe, but they had space aliens come in on the very first season, I think. It was almost like, well, Steve's an astronaut, and it's going to happen. And I think actually they were fairly restrained in involving him with heavy sci-fi elements that were out of this world, because I mean, you can imagine they could have really gone bonkers nuts, and had a monster of the week like Lost in Space, but they appeared three or four times. So I thought that showed some restraint, but also, as we know, once you get involved in aliens, you're going to be spending a lot of money. So it might have been a budgetary thing too. And I don't think any of their aliens, I mean, one alien looked just like Sandy Duncan, which is weird, but it
or Lurch for that matter.
or Lurch.
Well,
Who
that
played
Lost
Bigfoot,
Island,
Ted Cassidy.
Right.
that Lost Island two-parter there, Toppie. It looked like somebody who used to work in sci-fi special effects came to work drunk one day, because you've got some caveman eyebrows and some Vulcan type ears.
It looks like
Yeah.
they lost a makeup kit and went to Faye's drugstore.
Yeah. It had a lot of plots for the $6 Million Man. Was Steve goes undercover here, Steve goes undercover there, but some of them, got into more sci-fi aspects. Perhaps the biggest one being the first appearance of Bigfoot. And this rocked our world as little kids. And that episode with Ted Cassidy playing Bigfoot, that's all we could talk about the next day at school, because it was Monday, aired on Sunday nights. And boy, we went to school. We go, did you watch that? Did you see the Bionic Man fight Bigfoot? Oh my God. We were freaking out over it. It was a very popular series, and certainly caught the kids' imaginations.
And even though they eventually moved away from the spy angle as much, sometimes it was a matter of whether Steve was undercover or under the covers. Yeah. So we are at about halfway through tonight's show. We're just going to stroll on over here to our snack bar where our senior showgirl is going to be serving up all of our favorite treats.
Hi, what do you want? Bye.
And for your listening enjoyment tonight, we're going to be sharing a moment from an interview with Richard Anderson, who played Oscar Goldman on The $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman and the TV movies that followed. This is an interview with a podcaster called Retro Rewind. Let's give a listen.
Then agent called once and says they want you over at Universal. I said, "Oh."
And were you still under contract with anybody then, or those days were over?
No. You see, all of these shows lasted a year.
Oh, okay.
I began to wonder when is this going to change? I'd love to run a little while on these things, but you just don't know. You just take what comes. I believed in just working. And then they say, we got a job over there. I remember Guy Steiner said, it's called the $6 Million Man. Not bad. I said, I'll go. Yeah. You got to start tomorrow.
Really, that quick?
Well, they had replaced the actor who was doing it, Darren McGavin. Nothing, he's a wonderful actor. But I think there was a chemistry there. And that happens with that kind of stuff.
And he was in the pilot, right?
He was in the pilot, and they did a couple of 2 hours movies, and this was the third 2-hour movie they were going to do.
Yeah.
So I didn't get any sleep the night before. I like to learn everything about a script before I go in.
Yeah.
So I was up all night with it, boy. So I put on these dark glasses, and I had a scene with him, and he was in the hospital.
Right.
And I played that out, with glasses on. And then the reason I know that because a lot of people saw me in the glasses a lot because it was a nice prop.
Sure.
I have to tell majors, Asta, you got to do this. Take the glasses off. You got to do this.
Authority.
We've helped you.
Yeah.
You got to help us. We're having a tough time right now. Yeah. So I wore the glasses. The next day, the producer came over. He says, ABC looked at you and they said, this guy is perfect. I was just tired and put the glasses on, try to look as good as I could.
Yeah.
So that's where it started, the $6 Million Man. And we finished the 2-hour movie, and Glenn Larson came over and said, we're going to do a series on Friday night. And then he left the show.
Right.
And they brought in someone else in place. Howard Bennett was his name. Right. And we went through the roof. It was incredible. Yeah. And then at the end, I said, why don't we get a girl on this show, for God's sake? It's not an all-male affair here.
Yeah.
So they came up with it. Everybody read, and Mike Silverman at the ABC said, this is the one I want. And her name was Lindsay Wagner. She'd just been dropped by Universal. She'd been there about a year, and they dropped her.
She did some Rockford Files before that. Right?
That's right, yeah. But they dropped her, and then she came in, and I remember did the first scene with her out on location, and I just listened to her voice and the way she said it, and she had a sort of a lilt in her voice and a very sort of a charm, and she had a little fun with it.
Yeah.
I said, this is going to be something.
Yeah.
So
she's like the girl next door, kind of.
Yeah. And the first scene was in Ojai, actually, and she had to play tennis. And she says, Richard, I don't play tennis in my life. Well, I play tennis in my life. So I said, the main thing, look like you can do it. So we just, I showed her how to do it. And bang that ball, and that's all she had to do.
Yeah.
Play tennis. She never forgot it. We talk about it often. I just come back from Chicago, and she still brings the subject up about how she couldn't.
And we are back. Let me throw you a pass over there, Toppie.
No! Got it. Barely. So let's talk about the Bionic Woman. She was first a two-parter. Oh, by the way, the $6 Million Man loved their two-parters. They did a lot of them, and because it was an action adventure series, it just made it all seem bigger, and those cliffhangers were so great, and all us kids ate up anytime they did a two-parter, and they did a lot of them. One of them was the Bionic Woman, and she turns out she was an old flame and came back into Steve Austin's life, played by Lindsay Wagner, and her name was Jamie Summers, and they get engaged. She has an accident, becomes bionic because they want to save her, and Lee Majors, Steve Austin has mixed feelings about it, but in the end agrees, yeah, let's do it. But and then tragically, she dies at the end of the two-parter, and it was like whoa, it was heavy for us kids. Let me tell you. And then, someone said, "Why did we kill her? Let's bring her back." And turns out, oh, goodness, no, she didn't die. But anyways, that was the beginning of the Bionic Woman, who went on to be in her own show, The Bionic Woman.
And in part of the interview with Richard Anderson that you should be able to find if you look for Retro Rewind online, he actually mentions that that when Lindsay Wagner came on to the $6 Million Man, she was just losing her contract. So of course she was just in a guest appearance for $6 Million Man, and who would have known it would have been so wildly popular that she'd get her own show out of the deal.
I have a little theory, Billy. See what you think about this. Also guest starring in at least one early episode of the $6 Million Man was an actress named Farrah Fawcett, who shined and happened to be married to Lee Majors. In fact, for a while, she sported the name Farrah Fawcett Majors. And she had that certain something. She became a poster girl. And eventually she was cast in Charlie's Angels. But if things had worked just slightly differently, I could see her instead landing the part of the Bionic Woman and then going on to do that, until she said, "I'm too good for this," and quit. So what do you think about that? Was that just far-fetched, Billy, or do you think that she really maybe was considered, but went to Charlie's Angels and they never got a chance?
Well, they both aired in 76, I do believe.
Mm-hmm.
So if, you're writing the coattails of Steve Austin, do you really want to ride the coattails and be a sequel? I think she wanted her own vehicle to drive for her stardom versus, being a sequel TV show.
Good point.
If you had to pick a show, do you want to do a spinoff or do you want your own major vehicle?
Good point. By the way, one of the most pathetic / awesome moments in Emmy history was when Farrah Fawcett went up to accept an Emmy that she got for Charlie's Angels. I mean, can you believe that? I mean, how do you win an Emmy on Charlie's Angels? But anyways,
by the clothes and bell bottoms.
Yeah. By the way, Lee Majors never won an Emmy for the $6 Million Man, which is as it should be. But Farrah Fawcett wins an Emmy for the Charlie's Angels. She goes up on stage. She's clutching the statue. Oh my God! Oh, thank you. Oh, and then out in the wings appears Lee Majors, who comes on stage to surprise his wife. Oh my God! You're here. and the audience cheers, and oh, everyone is they're just, oh my god, it's just everyone loved it. One of the most awesome / disgusting Emmy moments in history.
I mean,
it was so contrived.
I mean, basically, that was a look who I'm boinking moment.
Mostly. Anyways, I think the Emmys were hosted on ABC, which of course hosted both shows at one time. Although the Bionic Woman did switch to NBC, which is a strange thing in and of itself. At any rate, clearly they thought, oh, here we go. Oh,
Right.
yeah, Lee Majors has to come out on stage when Ferg gets her in the Lee.
Well, he was her plus one, I guess. But hubby, Billy, in the next step in this discussion here, I was going to ask you now, besides the main characters, because of course, if you're watching the $6 Million Man, I mean, there's a good chance that you like the Steve Austin character, and that's actually part of the appeal of the show. Is in that era, we're in the Cold War and we're getting out of Vietnam. So, of course, who doesn't love a story of an American hero? Now, besides that main character, do you have any favorite supporting characters? Who did you like in the background?
It would have to be Rudy Wells, which is a very interesting character because in the pilots, he's a doctor who kind of wants to do this thing called bionics, and that's how we started. But then as the show went on, Rudy basically knows everything about everything, and every week it was what crap was he making next. So it was always interesting to see the gadgets and to see what he was making or involved in the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, aside from Dr. Rudy Wells and Richard Anderson's character, that was about it for the supporting cast. But they got Rudy Wells in there quite often. He was in the credits for at least part of the time. Not at first, but they actually did give him a credit later on. And I think they used him more in The Bionic Woman, don't you think, Billy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and the actor himself, Martin Brooks, he not really got typecast, but even before he was on the $6 Million Man, he was playing parts that were, professionals and doctors. He actually had a handful of roles on a series called The Doctors in the decade just before the Bionic or the $6 Million Man.
Yeah, they had actually three Rudy Wells. The first one was Martin Basil Blom. No, anyway, famous character actor. And I think he portrayed the doctor or the scientist originally. I'm not sure if he was called Rudy Wells, but then they had another actor, and then finally the last actor came in and did Rudy Wells for the remainder. And he's probably the Rudy Wells everyone remembers.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta interject here because there was another character that reoccurred on several episodes. The secretaries. One of my favorite is Peggy Callahan. Do you remember her? She was in the Kill Oscar Fembot episode. She was the shorter one with the blonde hair.
I do. I think I do remember her.
She kind of gets, she's soft-spoken, petite, and she's often mistaken for people like Sandy Duncan.
Yeah. If she's who I'm thinking of, yeah, I do remember. How many episodes do you recall that she was in?
In the $6 Million Man, she was Steve Austin Fugitive. I think she was in The Winning Smile. She was in the infamous crossover episodes with the Fembot, Part 2, Kill Oscar, and Task Force.
And she always played the same character?
Yes, the secretary.
Oh,
Or the
okay.
Fembot version of herself.
Yeah, now I knew who you're talking about. I can picture her.
Jennifer
she did
Darling was her name.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. What are the shows that just were breakout hits? Certainly the appearance of Bigfoot, especially the first time. Oh, they would bring him back. I can think of a couple of other huge episodes. Do you remember the $7 Million Man?
Oh, yes. Barney, not Miller, Hiller. Barney Hiller.
Mm-hmm. He was an extra million because both of his arms were bionic. So yeah,
one thing that stood out to me about that episode was and I couldn't place it at first. I had to listen to the guy's voice a few times before I recognized it because his face didn't actually quite match. The actor who played Barney Hiller, the $7 Million Man, would later on in the late 80s be in the Ghostbusters sequel, and he plays a judge who gets so mad that he brings some ghosts to life in his courtroom.
Oh, well, totally don't remember that, but I certainly remember him in the 70s being on every goddamn TV show in existence. He was just one of those working actors that was in everything.
So, Billy, if you had to pick just one episode of the series, $6 Million Man, what one would you introduce to somebody who maybe hasn't seen the show before?
Well, I wouldn't go too campy, and I wouldn't go too spy intrigue. I would probably do Day of the Robot.
All right. Now, was the first robot with John Saxon?
Correct.
Yeah. I just watched that today. All right, let's get into this just a little bit because that episode introduced a couple of things in a major way. It was very early on. I think it was only episode 5 of what I call the first season, but what everyone else calls the second season. It was very early on, and they hadn't quite invented or thought of some of the sound effects that we all know. Why don't you play a couple of them again, DJ?
Okay, here we go. And Steve is he's got his eye on you.
Yeah, and then of course when we knew he was being bionic, that he was using his bionic strength, we heard what? So those things hadn't been thought of right away, but on that episode, Day of the Robot, guess who made some of those noises? The robot did, not the $6 Million Man, but the robot did. But I think the producers and everyone said, "Hey, look at that! Doesn't that make it look cool?" And they said, "All right, well." Guess what? The $6 Million Man is now going to go every time he jumps or whatever. So that was a big development, but also it was the first time they extensively used slow motion. Can we talk about the slow motion, Billy? The slow motion.
Oh, who doesn't love the slow motion? I mean, you could see where they were still steering the ship into unknown waters, and they were still trying things out, like the original sound effect when Steve was going all bionic. Do you remember that, Toppie?
I think we heard it every week in the theme song, like that.
No, very first one was a heartbeat sound.
That's right.
Which is kind of dumb because they explained that his blood didn't need to pump because he only had one arm, and that was it. So why would he get all worked up and you'd hear his heart going really fast if he was only really pumping blood for one arm. It just never made sense to me. I'm glad they dropped it.
I am too. It was certainly, it became the tradition and just the way they portrayed those sound effects, the and the and it just you know, they did the slow mo. Anytime Steve did something bionic, they did it in slow motion, especially the endless goddamn running on these two shows, the Bionic Woman and the Run. I'm running fast, but I'm in slow motion, and I'm running and I'm running and I'm running and we're going to spend a lot of time watching me run in slow motion, but I'm really going fast.
They did try to make it as realistic as possible in the beginning, and then it just kind of went all bat crazy. But did you ever notice in the first few episodes when he would sweat, only his non-bionic arm would sweat?
God damn it, Billy. I noticed that for the first time in my recent rewatch this last week. I said, are they doing what I think I'm doing? That was really smart.
It was very believable in the first season, even with the robot. The robot was a robot and kind of stupid. It was pre-programmed. So he kept screwing up. And as I said to DJ, the fembots are a completely different type of animal. They just go into complete, not even plausible territory, where the robot kept making mistakes. His foot broke while he was driving, he kept having issues. So I like that it's plausible to some degree.
I agree. Certainly, I think that Day of the Robot was the first epic, holy Jesus, the stakes are high. And here's Steve facing off against someone as powerful as he was, and he seemed to be losing.
It also started the, oh my gosh, this show is getting a bit too violent now that kids are getting into it, and they're mimicking. Especially with how they did away with the robot. Do you remember how they did away with it?
I certainly do. Talk about impact wound.
They impaled it on camera with a steel I-beam.
Yeah.
He ain't coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess apparently it's either folklore or real, but apparently some kids seriously injured themselves. In some cases, deliberately hoping they'd get replaced with bionic parts. Do you think that's true?
Oh,
they did have a few letters that Lee Majors had to send out, I do believe. But the show changed in tone. I mean, even in Day of the Robot, Steve threw a car on a guy. There was no way he was alive at the end of it. So
good point.
After that episode, they changed the tone wildly, where Steve didn't really kill anyone anymore. But if you talk to people that occasionally watch the show, you say that Steve killed someone, and they're like, he didn't kill anyone. Yeah, he did. He killed a few people in the first few episodes.
Yeah, and I think also in the three pilot movies, there may have been a few deaths.
And we were going through a transition in television. While we were leaving the 60s, we're in the 70s, and we're almost in the 80s by the time the show was over. But an important distinction to make. It's all about the mentality of who's running the show, of course. But when it came to the spinoff, Bionic Woman, Richard Anderson actually mentioned in some interviews that Lindsay Wagner took an active role in the script of her show. In fact, if you watch it, just like a lot of the superhero programs, like in some episodes of Wonder Woman, they try to solve situations without violence, with wit. And so that's why you would see Jamie doing things where she had to think about it. And of course, she was also a teacher in her show, but
Yeah. It's true. It just coincided at about that time of actually that robot episode that parents were writing into TV stations saying not just about the $6 Million, but about a great many programming that was just violent, Saturday morning cartoons, and it was really quite a public outcry, and there were Senate hearings and blah blah blah, and so networks were really feeling the pressure to tone down the violence, which is why basically from then henceforth the $6 Million Man would throw people and they would fall into an empty cardboard box. And that's what it was for the rest of the series. He would never hit anyone, and actually that idea, that way of like showing strength but never hurting anyone, went right up to the Incredible Hulk, who never hit anybody. He would just throw people, and they would always land on a bunch of empty cardboard boxes.
We'll ignore the scene where he ripped Bigfoot's arm off. Thank you, though.
Well, it was a robot. He wasn't real. You know.
So as we start to wind things down here, Billy, I need to ask you, we just talked about the episode that would be the best to introduce someone new to, but what do you think, in your opinion, would be the one episode they should avoid? What was the worst episode of the run?
As much as I love the show, there is one episode I refuse and have never seen. The second episode of The Lost Island. DJ and I tried to watch that darn thing, and the minute that crazy drugstore makeup came up, I started looking at my laptop. I could not even get into the episode. I just hate that episode.
It felt like a low budget Gilligan's Island.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just say mine. They did a Christmas episode, probably in season 4. May have been season 5, and it was a takeoff on Scrooge, and it was just so horrible. It was just so good. But in general, folks, people who are going to want to see the $6 Million Man today are people like me who have a nostalgic fondness for it. I would never stand here or sit, as the case may be, and say it was a great television show. It was bubblegum and popcorn and great for kids. And I'll forever love it, like Billy said. But if you try to watch it today, well, give it a try, but I don't know. DJ baby, you're the best to answer that. Do they hold up?
Well, some of them do, but when they have special episodes where they focus a little too much on one subject, you kind of feel that they're dated. I mean, I on purpose had us watch the final episode of the $6 Million Man. Now, unlike the Bionic Woman, they didn't know that the show was being canceled when they produced that last episode. So it kind of goes off into the sunset with really no closure. And it's a good old story behind the Iron Curtain. Steve Austin has to conspire with the enemy, a Russian woman whose father was killed by him unbeknownst to her. And, well, it's one of those situations where Steve ends up being not so much undercover as he is under the covers.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, there was one little ditty that I read that the $6 Million Man ended with a cliffhanger they didn't resolve until the 3 TV movies came back.
Only if you're including if he got to bed with the Soviet chick. That's the only cliffhanger there really is. That's why That's one of the reasons why I dare say I like the Bionic Woman, because it evolved. It evolved with her, and with her saying, I can't do this anymore in the end. That's one of the things that always bugged me about the Bionic Man. Unless you looked at his hairstyle and the mustache, they could be from any season. With the Bionic Woman, they evolved her storyline and her relationships with other characters. And I have to go back to that Christmas episode, Toppie, because if there was ever a blatant commercial in a TV show, you sell toys at Christmas, right? When was the last time you watched that episode?
Oh, it's been years.
He's in a toy store. I believe it's this episode. He's in a toy store, and guess what's behind the counter? A huge display, or a small display, of $6 Million Man action figures.
Okay.
On camera.
Well, look, because the chat room seems to be most interested in these toys of the day. There's Tommy Hashbrown's posted a photo of Big Jim. Hi, Big Jim. Hi. And there were others. The $6 Million Man doll was the G.I. Joe size from days of yore, before they got miniaturized, in the 80s. So these were like, what? I don't know, 11 inches tall.
No, they were about 12, 13. Bigfoot is huge. If you look, DJ, don't touch them, but on the YouTube video, put your hand near one of them. You can see that they're much bigger.
Okay, they are, yeah. Would you say...
And my phone next to one of the toys.
So, Billy, do you mean that they're bigger than G.I. Joe was?
Yes, I do believe so.
Oh, okay. Let me... Just quickly, there was another toy that apparently someone invented to cash in on the $6 Million Man, only it wasn't.
Bullet Man.
Bullet Man. Well, Bullet Man was one of them, but there was another guy who only had one bionic leg, right? Because they had to be different. They couldn't give him two. So he had one bionic arm, one bionic leg, and goodness knows what else. And they showed him like running fast on a treadmill. And I was pretty young, but even I thought to myself, okay, how does this guy run with just one bionic leg?
He runs in circles. He runs in circles. That was actually, do you know the name of that toy? I actually have it.
Do you? What? I can't remember the name, but Bullet Man was like one of three of them. There were three from the company.
Powers.
Oh my God.
G.I. Joe's desperate attempt to cash in. And I had a hard choice back in the day. I could either buy the Bionic Man limb set and backpack radio, or Mike Powers, and he was on a square blister card. I can remember the aisle in Nom Brothers to this day, and I passed up my one and only chance to get a 12-inch G.I. Joe for the first time in history because I wanted Steve Austin's other arms. And I had to pay $60 to get a hold of this action figure, which after I bought it, got crushed and gotten destroyed in a move.
No.
But I still have the Bionic Man toys, so it worked out.
Yeah, and you gentlemen are both missing quite the conversation in the chat room. As I peer over the balcony here, Aunt Tudor, a friend of the show, has admitted that he had all of those toys from the 70s and that his mother should have known a little bit more about him then.
Seriously?
I was missing the chest hair on Steve Austin's action figure. It needed more chest hair. I do have, with the recovery set, with the arms I just mentioned, there was a leg set that came with Steve's infamous white shorts, and I own those.
Oh my lord!
Oh,
Well, listen, Aunt Tudor, I'll tell you, I didn't have the $6 Million Man dollar or any of them, but I did have G.I. Joe's best friend Ben, which is a true thing. But listen, those clothes didn't stay on him long. And I don't even know what happened to the clothes. The clothes came off, and I thought he was magnificent naked, and I played with him without clothes on.
Toppie.
I did. Anyways, perhaps we should move on. G.I. Joe's best friend. Joe's best friend.
So this is a part of the show that we call our snack tray. As we're walking out here toward the lobby, we want to, of course, thank hubby Bill for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Billy.
Well, thank you for having me.
You can occasionally hear him on that other show I do, Surely You Jest. And
don't call me Shirley.
Exactly. So we'll let hubby weigh in on this as well. So these are other things you might enjoy if you liked our $6 Million Man. I'll go first. Now, of course, I didn't get to see $6 Million Man in its initial run, and as I said earlier in the show, I stumbled across it vis-a-vis its child spinoff there, The Bionic Woman. Now, I grew up in the 80s, and kind of in that same vein, it was sort of a tribute, but more comedy. There was a cartoon, an animated series in the 80s called Inspector Gadget. Now, I can't be for sure, but I think Don Adams might have done the voice on that. And basically, it was a police officer that had all sorts of modifications to his body and his car, and he took care of his niece. So Inspector Gadget, and I think you can even watch it on Netflix. There may be some newer episodes of that.
Mm-hmm. I think that got quite well known. Even I know about, because that would have been a time that I wouldn't have been watching cartoons at the time, but even I know about Inspector Gadget, and I think you're right. It was either an actor that made himself sound like Don Adams, or
I believe it was. And we won't talk about Matthew Broderick playing him.
Oh, good God! They made a movie of it, didn't they?
A few.
But speaking of which, apparently, to maybe nobody's surprise, there's been projects going for quite some time for a $6 Million Man movie that just have never. I mean, right up to this day, there's treatments of it, and somebody, the script gets passed around and rewritten, and it's alive, and then it's not alive, and then it's suddenly, so it's still out there. Who knows? With the popularity of superhero movies, it might actually get made. Good Lord.
It's the epitome of development hell. It's been bounced around so much. By the time Mark Wahlberg finally makes it, he'll be in a wheelchair.
That's right. I did hear he was at least asked or expressed interest. I'm not sure. Oh, there's so many more things. I could talk forever about this darn show, but
we didn't even get into the dog.
There was a bionic dog. There was a bionic boy, two bionic boys, and a freaking bionic. That was on the Bionic Woman, right? She had the dog.
She did.
Yeah.
Steve didn't want it, apparently.
Yeah, in one of Lee Major's Bill Shatner style interviews, he basically said she can have the dog. But yeah. And let's not forget that when they did TV movies after Bionic Woman was off of the air, they actually starred a young and up and coming Sandra Bullock as the new Bionic Girl.
Yeah.
And sadly, the dog was probably recycled by the time they got to the movies.
I remember the movies, and I was certainly there watching them because, if you just couldn't. I mean, you just couldn't. It was like 10 years later, and you had to see these things. And I remember Sandra Bullock, and I remember Vince Van Patten as the Bionic Boy, and they were actually um, could have been and were pilot movies for relaunching the whole series with these new actors, but it just never happened. At any rate, to get back to the end here, and what I'd recommend. DJ said he recommended Inspector Gadget, so I'm going to go ahead and just recommend the Incredible Hulk that followed the $6 Million Man in the late 70s, and even had one of the same producers, Kenneth Johnson, became involved in the $6 Million Man at some point. Not from the very beginning, but he got in there and he did a lot for the show. And then Kenneth Johnson went on to create the Incredible Hulk, and so that's what I'd recommend. It was later in time, a little better production, and same kind of thing. A strong guy throws people around. That was it. So that's my recommendation.
Okay, and Billy, do you have a bone to pitch to our listeners and what else they might enjoy?
Campy 1970s action TV would have to be Wonder Woman.
Oh my God! Of course. Oh, the jumping and leaping.
Yes.
Trust me, folks, we are going to end. We are going to end. But
jumping, leaping, paper walls, and cardboard steel bars. How can you miss them?
There you go. But once they figured out on the $6 Million Man that they could make him leap, and they figured out, oh, if we just reverse this fall, we could make him leap up high. Anyways, there was never ending jumping in the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman, and of course, interestingly enough, on our Bionic shows, it was, of course, slow motion, but Wonder Woman jumped in regular speed. So thank you, Wonder Woman, for jumping in regular speed, not slowed down.
I don't think they could show her jumping in slow-mo with those little tight shorts of hers.
Perhaps.
Point.
Perhaps that was
Well, Hubby, if you'll do me a favor, here at the Marionette, we are an old venue for many a splendid thing, including vaudeville, and we once had a magician. Could you reach up there on that shelf for me and grab that bag of coins?
Sure, will do.
Okay, we're going to figure out what's coming up next. All right.
I can't wait.
Okay, hand me that capsule, Toppie.
You know.
Okay. Now, our next show will be Friday, April 2nd. So that's going to be the first Friday of the next month here. Same place, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so this is going to be an early 2000s comedy, fantasy, with a little bit of horror mixed in. It's going to be brought to you by the director of the Phantasm movies, that scary ball that's got a blade. And it stars Mr. Bruce Campbell of many an action show. It's Elvis Presley and JFK. They're in a nursing home where nothing happens until an Egyptian mummy comes and sucks the life out of folks through their back doors. Oh, and they decide to fight back. 2002's Bubba Hotep next time on Matinee Minutia.
Oh. There you
Toppie,
go.
before we say, let us know who was in the chat room with us.
We are so thankful for our lovely chat room folks that come back again and again. We've got V Money 7707, and we've got Janet, Lady Janet. We have the ever mysterious Cronehaven. I know she's listening there. We have Aunt Tudor, and we have our buddy pal Tommy Hash Brown. So thank you all for being here.
Okay, well, in the spirit of old time radio, how did that older couple say goodnight?
I think it was sort of like this. Good night, Gracie.
Thank you for listening to Matinee Minutia. Our show streams live the first and third Friday of each month.
Go to UniVozPods.net, click the tower for audio, and Discord for chat.
You can find the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Tweet us on Twitter at Matinee Minutia.
Join our Facebook group.
Visit our webpage at matineeminutia.com.
Have an idea for a future show? Want to send a message us?
Email us at matineeminutia@gmail.com.
Oliver.
This is Hollybug. I have a voice.
I have a voice.
You have a voice.
You have a voice.
We have a voice.
We have a voice.
Unique voices in podcasting.
UniVozPods.net. Okay, and I will go ahead and end the video. Ending broadcast.